Greetings, Guardians, my name is Bife here. In this place and time, we have reached another inflection point in Destiny's story. The first, perhaps, was the understanding that the darkness can be wielded by Guardians. This came with our fight against the House of Salvation and Eramis, when we learned that the darkness and its power could be controlled. Whilst its influence is corrupting, we slowly learned that its corruption truly originates from the presence of the witness behind that power. Darkness itself is a neutral force, not good or evil. Just as the light has been used for ill by the warlords, the darkness can be used for good, as we have used it for good. But this was not something so easily understood by the citizens of the last city, who saw their guardians beginning to wield the very thing that they had sworn to protect those citizens against. They did not see the inflection point's minutiae or nuance. They saw only the evil that the darkness had inflicted upon them being wielded by their protectors. And then came another series of actions that began to sow distrust. The armistice with the Cabal, the incorporation of the House of Light, and the realization that one of their great protectors, Osiris, had been possessed by the Hive God of Cunning. This was the first set of inflection points. It rattled the trust of the city to its core and shook the foundations of their trust in the Guardians. Now comes the second inflection point. The existence of Hive Guardians. A challenge that may well break the fragile silence of the citizens of the last city and challenge their beliefs to their core. Today we're going to be talking about the way that the citizens of the city reacted to the news about Hive Guardians by both looking at a few anecdotal accounts from characters and also by observing the nature of the citizens of the last city when they are faced with challenges, namely challenges such as the House of Light and the realization that Guardians were beginning to wield stasis. The reason we're looking at all of these moments in their totality is because I think they represent a rather important movement in the morale and trust of the citizens of the city, and the support that the Guardians truly enjoy. Remember that support does matter, in fact. The Guardians only have a place in the city thanks to the citizens, and whilst we could sit up in our ivory tower forever, inevitably we are beholden to those that we protect, and so the opinion of the people of the city matters. So let's chart where that popularity for Guardians stood and where that trust for Guardians stood, and see how we got to this moment. Because I do believe there was a point very early in the city's existence when it was believed that Guardians could do no wrong. When I say early in the city's existence, I mean in the infancy of its existence, before it was barely even a shanty town, and when the first few Guardians they had seen were nothing but noble protectors. This is an illusion that would very quickly have been shattered, and it would have been made clear that whilst the Traveller might have good intentions, its Guardians, chosen by its ghosts, well, maybe they didn't. Between Dredgen Yor and the Warlords, it was clear that evil Guardians were indeed possible. But this distinction did not have a great effect when, on the whole, the Guardians did make their attempts to defend the people of the last city, and as a result, I think the citizens of the city fell into a place where it was very easy for them to draw moral conclusions in simple black and white terms. Now, however, wherever they look, there are only shades of grey to question and be concerned about. So today we're going to go ahead and talk about the moments that led to that new status quo, and hopefully you'll all understand it just a little bit more. I mentioned it in the beginning, but I think that first true inflection point, where it was understood that Guardians could be corrupted, is important to at least mention. Of course, I already talked about Dredgen Yor, the Fallen Lightbearer, and the Warlords, who used the light for ill means. And I mention them because, again, they represent that important cardinal truth, that the light does not make someone incorruptible. It does not mean that someone cannot be evil. But from here, we then start blurring the lines more and more. And we did this over a long time. We did this when Guardians made more and more morally questionable decisions. But then, we reached the inflection point of Beyond Light and the wielding of stasis. Remember that stasis itself as a power is not evil, but the people of the last city do not necessarily know this. Zavala and Ikora have made public decrees that they do not condone the use of stasis and they will not support the operations of Guardians that go seeking out this power. They made these decrees publicly because the people of the city are still scared of the power of darkness, and they need to present a face of united leadership to the civilian population and guardians at large, some of whom are either questioning whether darkness should be used or are actively hunting stasis users. But then, when you have examples of stasis being used within the city, such as the example shown in the Reese Walker shotgun from the Iron Banner, you can start to see what the real effect of Guardians wielding darkness does. There is a very simple set of reactions for all the characters in the city, and I want you to take a quick note and remember the reaction not only of those citizens to seeing stasis, but also to the Elixni in this story, Vrixis. You'll start to understand how terrifying this general sentiment about stasis really is. Take a listen to this. A hurled bottle strikes an Elixni in the head, sending him staggering to the side in a crowded street. Glass glitters on the ground. People gather in a semicircle around him, shouting invectives and slurs as he bleeds midnight blue from a deep cut in his brow. He has nowhere to run, cornered between a neon-lit club pulsing with the bass beats of rhythmic music and an alley blocked off by rubble left over from the Red War. "Please, no harm! Vrix's friend!" he cries, two hands clutching his head, another held out flat as if it would ward off the crowd. "Looking for brother. Missing. Please." The crowd does not care, and they continue to work themselves up into a fervor. Lakshmi Tu's words fill their mouths, many of them too young or too naive to realize it. Vrixis can't understand so many unfamiliar languages shouted at him at once, but he understands the tone of violence well. His posture says everything. The fear in his eyes carries additional nuance. He fears what happened to his brother. Hate begins to take root in his heart. A foundry worker steps out of the crowd, threateningly racking around into a shotgun. He aims down at the Elixni, hands trembling. "You want to ask about family?" the human yells. Vrixis does not know what he's talking about. "Your people kidnapped my sister. She was running supplies from Earth to Titan. You raided it." Vrixis does not... He is cut off by a blast from the shotgun that pulverizes the street beside him. Vrixis crumples to his knees and cowers. "Please," he says, and in the same motion picks up a broken piece of bottle he'd been hit with earlier to defend himself. The crowd screams in outrage. When the foundry worker advances on Vrixis and racks another round into the shotgun, there is a sudden, cold snap that fills the air with mist. The shotgun flash freezes, shatters like glass, and scatters into pieces of blue-black stasis. The worker recoils, clutching his half-frozen arm, screaming. Vrixis sees the crowd part behind his attacker, and a hunter clad in black and gold, with luminous markings on her armor, strides toward them both. Darkness coalesces around her hand. Stasis crystals drift like tiny moons around her. "That's enough," Aisha shouts. "You should all be ashamed of yourselves. Look at you!" Aisha grabs the injured foundry worker by the collar with her free hand and shoves him back into the crowd. "Clear out before I clear you out. Now!" Wind swirls around Aisha's feet, kicking up crystalline debris in whirling threads of darkness. The crowd recedes like a violent tide, some tripping over others in their haste to flee. As the crowd disperses, Aisha dismisses the sickle of stasis, and the swirling wind at her feet fades as well. She turns, looking at Vrixis, and offers a hand out to him. "I'm sorry," she says, with a tightness in her voice. He cannot see her expression behind the facade of her helmet. Vrixis does not take the offered hand. His eyes show the same fear, the same hate. "It's okay," Aisha says slowly, offering her hand again. "You're safe now. They're..." "Not safe," Vrixis snaps at Aisha, his eyes dipping down to her hand and then back up to her helm. "You are just like Aramis, mind poisoned." Aisha's breath hitches in the back of her throat, and she slowly lowers the offered hand, closing gloved fingers into a briefly formed fist. "You're hurt. At least let me escort you to a medical..." Her voice trails off. Vrixis is already backing down an alley, blue eyes locked on her. She feels a weight on her shoulders. in her heart. The Eliksni disappears into the shadows, leaving Aisha alone under an endless night sky. The crowd that was assembled saw the power of stasis and went reeling in terror, some of them tripping over each other just to get out. But what's even more telling is the reaction of the Eliksni that was saved by this dark power. Vrixis was also terrified and even went as far as to say that the Guardian was mind-poisoned like Eramis. This is really only half the story, because this also gives us insight into the beliefs of the citizens of the Lost City about the Eliksni, but furthermore than that, that's really only something that gives further catalyst to point us towards this belief amongst the ranks of the city's people that the Guardians are no longer trustworthy protectors. We can see this clearly in the lore tab for another weapon from the Season of the Splicer, the Lost Cipher. It's clear that Vrixis' brother that he was looking for has been murdered in cold blood by the city's civilians. A small excerpt from it, which I will only read a little of again, tells us part of the justifications used for such a heinous act, for such a murder, and all of this is spoken by a mother to her daughter while she's trying to rope her into the act of disposing of the body of the Eliksni they've just killed. That small extract reads as follows. "I don't have time to talk about this now," her mother snapped. "You don't know what's going on. You didn't see them looking through the windows. You didn't hear what one of them said in the ramen shop." For the first time, her mother looked up. Dangerous intensity burned in her eyes. "They're using the dark to blind us, and we're not going to let it happen. Now help me." Helena walked slowly to the trash piled in the corner. Towels soaked with blue fluid, rubbery tubes, strange scraps of metal, a laminated card that read "Temporary." Her voice was small. "Mama, what did you do?" The point of all this again is to simply demonstrate that the use of stasis by the Guardians has clearly not allowed them to earn their trust within the Lost City as easily. It has made them lose trust that was previously garnered. And perhaps more importantly, actions such as the harboring of the House of Light, even if eventually, in the Season of the Splicer, there was a degree of reconciliation, have not helped either. The decisions and leadership of the city has ultimately been unsteady. It has been rocked by the decisions of the Guardians, and without any civilian government there to harbour up support and for the citizens to use as a means of airing their grievances, it is even harder now for them to trust us. And all of this results in what we have begun to see manifest in the new exotic Titan armor, the Hoarfrost Z. Within, we see the perspective of another civilian who has lost faith in the Guardians. I will say, though, his choice in new compatriots is rather interesting. He's examining a dead ghost that has been recovered. Most importantly, this dead ghost is a dead hive ghost. Take a listen to this. The Lost City, Earth. GX818 experimental notation. Recovered hive ghost inoperable. Still responds to electrical impulse. Ran gauntlet of tests and gleaned welcome protocol data. New chest rig comes in handy for experimentation and observation. Every time the ghost exhibits movement, can render it inert without so much as lifting a finger. Must employ this technique in future studies. Hardware architecture analysis confirmed that this derelict creature exhibits a malleable structure, certainly wasn't created with a specific framework in mind, and looks to have adapted its configuration to its light bearer once acquired. Is this necessary for the bonding process? For creating the perception of companionship? Is it possible for a ghost to connect to a light bearer without undergoing restructuring? Previous behavioral studies have shown that ghosts can be selective. Given lack of pre-programmed directives, it is now clear that they make conscious choices about whom to revive. Hardware evidence suggests that ghosts were always capable of reviving Hive. Perhaps they always intended to. Addendum for Spider. You've asked me why I like to tinker with your toys before I deliver them. Well, here you are. Proof of what I've been saying all along. We live at the whims of a god who blesses the few at the expense of the many. We follow leaders who claim to understand this speechless orb, and we are expected to do as it wills, no matter the cost to ourselves. So many people still condemned to die, and it willingly granted immortality to a death cult, served on a silver platter by these automata. Well, I too have a will, and I will not prostrate myself before something capable of such evil. Your ever-skeptical Hacker exile, Alexei. Well, Alexei, what a fascinating set of discoveries you've unearthed for us. From this we can learn a little bit more about the nature of ghosts, some speculation about the questions of whether they need to be bonded to their light bearers or whether they are malleable by their very nature. We learned that an exiled Hacker engineer is working for the Spider. We know, presumably, that the Spider is still alive, and most importantly for the big picture of it all, we know a little bit more about what this discovery has done to the morale of people within the city. The people in the city likely know about the Lucent Hive. If they don't right now, on a whole, they all eventually will in time. And when they find out, I cannot imagine that the Vanguard will enjoy the same degree of trust that they once did. When that moment comes, I simply have to hope that any of the Guardians will have enough authority to lead. But that's all from me for now. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope it gives you a bit more insight into what's going on in the world of Destiny at current. Of course, if you enjoyed, go ahead and hit the like button, and of course leave your own thoughts down below in the comments section. If you want more Destiny content, go ahead and hit subscribe and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. But as per usual, know that your viewership is quite enough for me. And in the meantime, my name is Byf. Per audacia ad astra. I'll see you, Starside.